Hey guys, Sealgare here, coming to you with another strange, mysterious case. Now, today we're going to be talking about the body snatchers of Scotland. Now, you may be asking, what could this be about? And then maybe you're thinking, why are people just stealing corpses? Well, today I'm going to cover the cases of William Burke and William Hare and the murders they committed in Scotland, Edinburgh, between 1827 and 1828. Now, this all happened when William Burke moved from Ireland to Scotland. Now, when he moved there, he had no stream of income. So, to provide for his family, he had met this man named William Hare, who had owned a cottage, and together they now ran this cottage. So, now you'd be wondering, what where are you going with this? How does this relate to body snatching? And just hold on a minute. Hold your horses. So this all started because a man that came and paid to stay in the or did not pay to stay in this cottage died overnight. This was before he can make proper arrangements to pay for this. Now, William Burke and William Hare, being quite frustrated by this, um, they decided to break into this man's coffin and steal his corpse. Now, you may be asking, why would you steal a corpse? What profit is there to gain? Are they just grave robbing? Austin, these are not, Sealgare, these are not things that, that are strange and mysterious. But let me tell you something more. So they found this anatomist named Robert Knox. And in this time, he was very famed for his anatomist courses and his cadavers that he dissected for people in all of his classes. Now, at first, they had found this man and they sold him this single cadaver, and it was reported that Robert Knox would pay between $12 and $15. Now, the money that they lost was only a few dollars, two or three. So the villainous, heinous acts of the people that come next can make a little more sense. It seems like most things like this happen out of a want or need, some type of greed for more money. Most people aren't just evil for the sake of evil. Now, that's not to say that that doesn't happen, because we all know it does. But I wouldn't like to paint everyone in this black and white picture of, evil and good. Now, it's clear that they are not good people. But when you can understand that it's not always common at this time that you can make plenty of money just off something so quick and short. So I imagine they were just, engorged with like this need to sell more, to get more money. So what they ended up doing is they would set up this cottage. Nothing's changed, just like normal. And when people would come to visit, they would give them plenty of alcohol. Now, once they got their tenants good and drunk, they would sneak into their rooms at night and smother them or kill them in some manner that was quiet so they would not wake the others. Now, then they would take these corpses, unburied, hide them, and then sell them to Robert Knox. Now, you may be asking yourself, why would this anatomist be buying murdered corpses? Now, there is no proof that Robert knew that these were murdered people. So what ended up happening is, like, you would think, how could they ever get caught? Or how did they not get caught sooner? They ended up killing 15 people before their final victim. An elderly woman who was a professor at the University of Wyoming came to stay in Scotland. Now, they believed her to be just some friendless old woman. Now, that may have been the case. I have not done my research into her myself. I didn't see that it might be relevant to the case. Now, what we find is they did the same thing like normal. They got her drunk and then they killed her in the night. Now, it was reported that the women, their wives, also knew about this and were an active member in getting all these people drunk. So you can imagine, with 4 people, it probably was a easy task to get a single woman inebriated, killed, and transferred out of their home so it wouldn't be found within the day. Now, So they thought themselves some type of evil geniuses, I assume, sneaking around through the night, lurking with these dead corpses, selling them, thinking they were never going to get caught. Now, these idiots decided to take it in and hide this under a stack of hay. Now, two witnesses saw them do this and reported it to the police. Now, they did end up selling this body to Robert Knox, and it wasn't clear if they had seen them selling them to Knox, or they had seen them hiding the body. But they did know that these men were having a business transaction with Robert Knox, and then they found that they had been hiding a corpse. And with the way things were going in this time, having cadavers was not a common thing. You have to understand, back in this time in 1827, because of we had a weird stigma back then. Now, I can understand it. We saw it as sacrilegious or something horrible and disrespectful to dig through another person's corpse. Now, if you didn't realize the type of scientific findings for medical and just the human anatomy that we have found and discovered through dissection and anatomy, this wouldn't make sense to you at all. You'd see men cutting up corpses for the sake of cutting up corpses. But as we know today, this is a valuable thing we still do. So, for a long time, it was seen as a crime to do this. And then after the Murder Act of 1752, they were allowing scientists to use murderers, the executed murderers, as victims. Now you can understand why it might seem odd that Robert Knox would have a surplus of cadavers coming into his office, because he would have one of these for every class he hosted. Now, like I said, in this time, it wasn't very common. And you got to think, Edinburgh may be a big town for Scotland, but murderers are there's not as many murderers as there would be for classes for Robert Knox. So it's probably suspicious that this man was continuing to get cadavers, knowing somehow from nowhere. Now, they did alert these two eyewitnesses alerted the police, and they raided Knox's facilities, finding the corpses of these dead people. It wasn't reported how many of them they found. Obviously, they had found the woman, the University of Wyoming professor, and they confronted Robert Knox, William Hare, William Burke, and both of their wives, arresting them. Now, they had to let Robert Knox go because they had no proof that he knew where these bodies were coming from. Now, you may be asking yourself, it's pretty obvious. How would they not know? How would you not know that a bunch of clean, unburied corpses were not coming from the best of places? Well, that's the thing with law, that you can't just go off assumptions. Now, whether it is right or wrong is not something I'm here to discuss. What I am here to discuss is how they didn't have the evidence on William Burke and William Hare, nor their wives. So, besides that they had made this single transaction, so they convinced William Hare to flip on William Burke, corroborating all of the murders that had happened from 1827 to 1828. All 16 of the murders. They even tried to get William Burke's wife in on this as well. They ended up convicting William Burke and sending him to death. Now, they didn't have enough evidence to stick to William Burke's wife. And after this, William Hare and his wife were granted amnesty. Now, you may think this is wrong, and that may be. But they wanted to be able to at least convict one person guilty of these murders. Now, with that perspective, you might understand where they would be coming from. But after this, William Hare him and his wife were to be never seen from again. So, you may be asking, what's so strange and mysterious about this case? Well, duh. I mean, they're murdering people and selling bodies. It's pretty weird. But that's not it. The weird thing that caught my eye about this case is the more I dug into it, the more I realized that not just the murders and the selling was odd. It was reported that after William Burke's execution, they had turned his skin into souvenirs to be given away and sold. And then they donated his skeleton to anatomy. Now, it does make sense under the law that they would sell his skeleton. But by any standards of any humans ever, making souvenirs out of another human's flesh, in my opinion, has never been smiled upon. I am just curious who and why this was employed as a tactic. And you can even go and see these still today in Edinburgh, Scotland. At the William Burke Museum, you can still go see the one that it was reported to. The most famous one is a pocketbook, and this is just a pocketbook made of skin, human leather. If things don't get more bizarre than that, I don't know. This is a governmental entity that decided to make a pocketbook out of William Burke's flesh and then put it on display. Other than that, case is pretty cut and, it makes a lot of sense. These people were murderers, they get convicted, one flips on the other, never to be seen again, the one gets murdered, and then his body's turned into souvenirs. I don't know, guys, it's pretty odd to me. But, that's not up for me to decide, that's up for you guys. Now, this did lead to something very important. In 1832, they decided to expand the expand the amount of corpses or cadavers that they would be options for them. So now they would be accepting those who died of suicide, died in prison, of old age, and those who were donated. Now, I was wrong. They did not do the old age. I was thinking of something different. They did suicides, those who died in prison, and foundling orphans. A foundling orphan is just someone who did not have a family and they found him. So they would make it out of orphans, suicide victims, murderers, and prison deaths. Now, this is still not a perfect system, but it is obviously better than the Murder Act of 1752, where they could only do this from murderers. So this just tells you, it makes me think, really, that this all could have been avoided if William Burke and William Hare, one, were not evil sons of bitches who had greedy families, or they would have expanded their, the amount of bodies that Robert Knox could have bought and all the other anatomists around the area. Because this really came from the necessity of cadavers and corpses to dissect for anatomy. Now you could say, is it really necessary, to dissect this many bodies? And maybe not. But without this, we wouldn't be as far in our medical knowledge as we are today. And to think of how many lives that we saved from these types of, dissections is probably, far and few between the amount of people that might have feel disrespected by the act of cutting up a corpse. And if we would have, enacted this sooner, maybe these men wouldn't have been incentivized to sell corpses, and Robert Knox wouldn't have been able to buy them because he wouldn't have had a need for it. Now, this isn't to absolve any of their sins. Obviously, William Burke and William Hare and Robert Knox were all guilty in some fashion. I'll let you guys decide on how, where, and the degree. It's not for me as an individual to decide that. Now, that's all I have for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this story about the Snatchers. They did make this into a movie in 1945, it was called the Body Snatchers, and then in 1959 they had the Flesh and the Fiends, and then this was named Mania in the U.S. Um, I've never seen the movies. I can't vouch for them. I'm not big on old films, but if anyone's ever seen them, I'd love to hear about it. If you guys have any other stories you'd like me to talk about, research, and deliver, I would be more than happy to. Um, Next week, I plan to do a video on Dyatlov Pass. Maybe you're familiar with the case, maybe you're not, but it's one that always interests me and I found super intriguing in the way that everything played out. But until then, Seal Gear out. I'd like it if you guys could like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you guys thought of the video, any improvements and suggestions down below. Thank you. Later.